Hey girls, hey. Hey boys, hey. Welcome back to my channel. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification button because I will be doing a giveaway real soon. And we're going to go ahead and get started with Letters from Christopher. This is Mama Beauty's here from North Carolina. And this is chapter 23, and she calls it Reflections of Christopher. And so she said that the following reflections are what Chris shared through informal conversations. But I want you guys to know ahead of time before I read this that he says one thing and then contradicts it right after. And then says one thing and then contradicts it. He says that he doesn't want to make it look like he's blaming Shanann. But all throughout this, he is blaming Shanann. Okay? So just wanted to give you a heads up on that. So she pretty much asked him, how does he sum up his life in a few paragraphs? And he says that he's only 34 years old and that just like his family, that he lost everything and lost his life. And that it stopped at his age and that he took it from himself. And he lost his family, his house, his job, his friends, and everything that meant anything to him. And so did his daughters and their lives. So I have no empathy. And so now Shanann, he says that he knows now that Shanann and him were not made for each other and that he just didn't have the nerve to tell her his thoughts or how he was feeling. And he says that he's not blaming Shanann, that he is not doing that at all. And that they were just different people and they had their own views and different personalities, and that usually opposites attract and get along pretty well. And that was just not the case for them two. And when he thinks back, he doesn't think that he was true to himself when he met Shanann. He said that he was nervous around her. He could never really relax or be himself. And she was just like this confident person with this aura about her that, she just, people listened to what she said. And he was just the quiet guy, that wanted to be on the background. So that's what Chris is saying in his own words. And he said that he tried too hard and that he was always trying to impress her and that he could remember only one time that he messed up when it came to impressing her. And it was on their very first day, and that they were meeting at a theater. So he wore sandals and shorts and a t-shirt. And when he got there, he felt like a complete moron because she was dressed to the nines and it was a really nice theater. And he said that he was surprised that he got a second date because because of the way that he looked, and that they really did have a good time that night, and they laughed about it throughout their marriage. So he said that they dated for a year and then got engaged, and that he was proud to buy her the biggest diamond that he could, and that he saved up 6 months' wages to buy her this diamond, and that she loved it, and that he arranged for both the families to be on the beach, and he proposed to both families in front of them, and that his family, her family just loved him and told Shanann that she better not let Chris go, that he was a catch pretty much. And that she loved him and he loved her, and that it was the family that he had always wanted. And he said that there was one point, I already told you that. And then the next few months they spent preparing for their wedding. And he says on their wedding day, it was the happiest day of his life, and that he looks back to good memories now while he's sitting in his jail cell. And that there was no bride in the entire universe that was as beautiful as Shanann on her wedding day. And that after that, they just settled into a routine, and that their life became mundane. And that the girls ended up being a blessing, but he says that everything revolved around them and giving them the best life. And it sounds like here that he's saying they're a blessing, but he's also like sounding in the next sentence that he has a little bit of resentment towards them because he had to give them everything and give them the best life. So he says that he thinks back and he still can't believe that he's lost his entire family and that it was, again, the family he wanted his whole life. And it was the most tragic thing that he could ever do. And he's still saying that it was not his mind or his hands that was doing it, that he was definitely being controlled by something evil. And he says that he hopes everyone believes him. And Shanann created a life, he said, that looked perfect and that it almost was, except for him. And he said that he needed to rise to the occasion and like be a man and help his wife see that she could not control him and everyone around them. And he says that if she wouldn't be able to handle it, that they could just get a divorce. And he said he just wasn't able to do that. And that he never went to Shanann and told him how he felt. Told her how he felt. And he said that they did not need nor want that big home. And that he was raised in a small ranch home. And that they were perfectly happy and not house poor, and that life was much easier for his parents than they were for him. Woe is me, Chris. And that the big house was totally Shanann's idea, and that he knew that they couldn't afford it, but he just wanted to make her happy and not tell her no. And that they had the house built when they first moved to Colorado, and that they lived with one of Shanann's friends, and that most likely Shanann and that friend had a falling out because they stayed with that friend for almost a year, but after they moved out, they didn't talk to that friend anymore. And he said that he didn't know anything about it or why they didn't talk anymore, but he felt really bad because they had stayed there for a really long time. And he said that their house payments were $2,800 a month, and that $500 of that went directly towards the insurance, and that wasn't even including the HOA payments that they were having to pay, and that they were housebroken, and that was a huge like demand and pressure on their lives. And that another stressor was that he got paid and he could watch the bank account deplete to nothing, down to zero, because Shanann liked to spend and shop. That's what he's saying. And he said he felt trapped and that he couldn't leave to get an apartment because they never had a penny. And that he always had a lot of medical bills to pay from the girls and Shanann's neck surgery. And that it had always been a thing for him to pay the bills on time and have a little bit of money stashed away for savings. And that they just never accomplished that. And he said that they had the house built exactly how we wanted, are his words. And then right after that, he says his only contribution was the outside stonework and the color of the exterior of the home, and that he was not allowed to have any voice inside the home, and that the house was in his name only. That he couldn't design anything inside the home, that Shanann created the whole inside however she wanted, and that he didn't have any say in that. That he only got to pick what color the house was and the stonework in the house. But he starts it out telling this story that they had that we had the house built for us exactly how we wanted it. So you see how it's just like contradicting itself. He'll say one thing and then completely backtrack. Like he says one of the reasons that Shanann wanted a big house is because she liked throwing these big extravagant parties, and that she wanted to make it look like they had everything, and that the parties she would throw were just huge. And how things looked to others meant everything to Shanann. And so he said that health meant everything to him, and that he loved to work out, and that he even exercises now in prison. And that was something that Shanann resented about him, was him working out. And I doubt that. And he said that she told him it took time away from them. And that because of that, he started getting up at 4 a.m. to work out. And that he used to weigh 245 pounds, and now he's only 170. And that Shanann would get dressed in running clothes and have her take a picture of her. Have him take a picture of her. I'm sorry, I'm getting everything confused. So sorry. He said that Shanann would get dressed up in her running clothes. She would ask him to take a picture of her, and she would post it saying that she ran with him earlier and she hadn't ran, and that they would laugh about that. And then he said that she did not, that he would run sometimes after he put the girls down, and she did not like for him to do that either. And that he told Nikki this was one of the reasons why he was separating from her. And that obviously they were heading in separate directions, and that at least that's what he told Nikki. And that one of the reasons they were separating was, after that he says that now when he thinks about that, he realizes how shallow it sounds. He said that he told everyone that they had been talking about separating for months, but honestly, they had not talked about it at all. And that Shanann had been blindsided by what was happening, and that he was building walls and she had no idea. And that he built walls so he wouldn't have to explain anything to her. And that he did sleep in the basement some, but it was only at the very end after they had gotten back from North Carolina. It was not before that. And he said that they went to San Diego from June 22nd to June 26th. And as soon as they got back on June 26th, Shanann took the girls and left for North Carolina. And he said that's when his life just went crazy and got out of control. He said the biggest reason that he wanted to separate from Shanann was because she was bossy, and that she did not show him any respect, and she was teaching the girls to do this to him, and that they were acting the same way, and that he realized now that he should have gotten counseling, and that's what Shanann had wanted. And he felt then that the marriage was just too far gone, so he didn't. And that he was tired of how controlling she was. And that he was especially tired of her keeping him from his family because he felt like it wasn't for a good reason. And on the morning of the murders, the thing that mainly made him so angry is being told that she would keep him away from the girls. He said that when Shanann would get upset with family, it really, really worked on him. And that the drama from that was always going on, and that he regretted saying these horrible things that he had said to his parents, and that they never ever fought back when he said these things, and that they lived so far away, but yet they were willing to help him with anything that he ever needed. And he says that he regret that he never tried to remain close to them. And that it was mostly because he was trying to do what Shanann wanted him to do to keep her happy. And that he didn't want to be told what to do. And he couldn't see them. And it seemed that she would have problems with his mom and sister. And then she would want him to step in and call and confront them. Or go off on them, he says, for the way that they had treated her. And he just felt so thrown in the middle. And that he just wanted to get along with Shanann and have her get along with everybody else, but she was really bossy. He said that in front of other people, she was all about appearances and she didn't do this. He said never did she act like that around friends and family. But however, around his family, she would constantly order him around. Now, these are Chris's words in his in his conversations with Cadel. So he said that he didn't really notice it that much, that it was just his usual, that his mom would ask him why he allowed her to do this, and that he knows now that when someone is having an affair, that it becomes second nature to blame the spouse for all these sorts of things to try to justify why you were cheating. And he says he doesn't want to sound like he had an excuse. Now, if you can realize that with the affair, why can't you realize that you shouldn't be saying all these things about her since you murdered her? So I just don't understand how he is so aware and conscious of certain things, but so unaware on other things. And so he said that the communication had been breaking down for the last 5 years, and that it had steadily gotten worse, and that he blamed himself because he did nothing to fix it, and that it got to a point where they didn't have any substance or anything to talk about, that he would try to like calmly talk to her and it would fall on deaf ears, and that she gave him no validity to how he felt, and that he just tried to keep the peace, and he would just sit there next to her on the bed, and she would look at her iPad or call people on the phone. And he said that when he would talk to her, she would say something like, "Oh, you were talking to me because I wasn't listening." And so he said he had been thinking about it, killing his family, and that he didn't want to, but he knew he was going to, and that he did not realize that he would feel anger and so much of it the morning that he killed his family, because he had never felt it before. Once again, this nonsense. And that he knew something was controlling him, and he felt something very dark around him, and it seemed like that for a couple of weeks. And that he was not blaming Nikki, that she was a victim too, but he did start feeling this way once he started seeing her. And he says that he would call it a demon, but not in a religious sense. He says he calls it a demon because it's the only thing he can think of to call it. And that his conscious mind could see what was going to happen before it happened, and he basically couldn't stop himself. And he said that if he knew he had to tell his parents that they couldn't see the kids, that it was really, really going to hurt him, especially his dad, and that it would be hard on his mom too, because it was hard on her when she couldn't even see Chris. And so he was afraid of what it might do to them. And he said that his dad had had struggles before, and he didn't want to be the reason of any of his problems. And that he now realized that he caused them major heartache anyway. And that his dad misses Shanann and the girls very much. And that they both do. And he said that his dad is his hero, and that Shanann knew that. And he said that they are always just people that go with the flow. And he realized that Chris admits that he did not go with the flow that day. And that it made him very angry to think about her ultimatum. And he said that he was tired of not feeling like he could be himself around her, and that he couldn't make decisions for himself. And he said this is one of the things that he loved about Nikki, is that he could be himself and he didn't have to pretend, and she didn't get mad at him. In all actuality, he said Shanann wanted a man that would stand up for himself and not be pushed around. And he said that he didn't know why he just couldn't be that man. And it says that he thinks it might be the criticism. It wasn't her fault anymore, that it was his fault, he says. And it wasn't her fault anymore than it was my fault. We are who we are. So he says he's not blaming Shanann, but that sounds pretty much like blame. It wasn't her fault anymore than it was my fault. We are who we are. So he said that the communication just broke down after a couple of years that they were married, and it wasn't easy for him to talk to her. He felt like she was more accomplished and educated than her for some reason, and he says that he just felt like he was below her. And so when he said that in the years he was growing up, he never really had to think about those sort of things, and that his parents really never gave him a hard time about being himself. And that he said that he actually knew he was different from other kids. He was just more socially withdrawn. And that he said the choices he made the mornings of the murders will haunt him for the rest of his life, and that he will hear his baby begging him not to kill her for the rest of his life. And he said after he got into prison and he moved to the Wisconsin prison, he received a letter from a woman he did not know. He says that she said she did not know him, and that she had seen him briefly on television, but she didn't pay much attention to it, so she wasn't familiar. And so she said that she was writing him about a dream that she had had a couple of nights before that, and that in the dream she was walking past a room and she could see a baby in the room and hear a small child crying. And she said that she walked by the room and she noticed something dripping from underneath the bed onto the floor, and that she walked to the bed and she looked at the little girl, and the little girl was covered in liquid. And she grabbed the child and she picked her up, and she said when she picked her up, she told her, "I'm having so much fun up here." And she said the woman realized that the small child was covered in gas, and that she woke up very disturbed about the dream, and she remembered something about gasoline on the news that she had seen earlier, and that she did not know his name or anything about the case, so she Googled and found the story. She said that she saw pictures of her family, and she realized that the little girl in the dream was Bella, and that she was writing him to let him know that they are in heaven, and that he did not need to beat himself up anymore for what had happened. And Chris says that he wrote her back and he never heard from her again, and he appreciated her writing about the dream, but he already knew that without a doubt Bella was in heaven. And as far as beating himself up, that he's going to do that for the rest of his life every day, and until the day he dies, and that his life was over, and that he received a letter that lit him on fire. And I think here he's talking about the author Cato's letter. He said, "This letter told me that God could still use me, and that I could help others, and that maybe I could reach someone that was planning to do something horrendous, and I could offer them a way of hope, and I could save lives and serve for the rest of my life." And that is how the author ends chapter 23. And those were all words from Christopher, according to the author. All right, 24 is next. It's arrest and plea sentencing.